Cruise alert, major port faces fuel crisis. What it means for passengers. You think your cruise is safe because you booked with a major line at the world's busiest port? Think again. Port Miami, the cruise capital of the world, home to 8 million passengers a year, is facing a fuel crisis so severe that cruise executives are warning ships could abandon Miami altogether. We're not talking about some minor hiccup. We're talking about the complete loss of the port's only fuel source, with no backup plan, no alternatives, and a ticking clock that expires in 2027. Today, I'm revealing the shocking details of this crisis that cruise lines are desperately trying to keep quiet. From the $180 million real estate deal that triggered this disaster to the emergency meetings where commissioners admitted they've been playing with hell, you need to know what's really happening. And wait until you hear number 7. It involves your specific cruise potentially being canceled or moved to another port entirely. But before we dive into this mess, hit that subscribe button right now if you want to stay ahead of cruise disasters like this one. Because trust me, what you don't know about this crisis could absolutely ruin your vacation. Number 1, the $180 million deal that broke Miami's fuel supply. Here's the bombshell nobody saw coming. On September 30th, 2025, a company called Transmontaigne sold Port Miami's only fuel source, a massive terminal on Fisher Island, to luxury real estate developers for $180 million. That's right, the fuel depot that keeps every single cruise ship running at the world's busiest port, it's being turned into luxury condos. Think about that for a second. Port Miami handles 23 different cruise lines. Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, the world's largest cruise ship, Carnival's entire fleet, Norwegian, MSC, Virgin, Disney, they all depend on this one fuel terminal. And some genius decided to sell it to developers who want to build million-dollar apartments. Here's the kicker. Port Miami doesn't have its own fuel facility, never has. For 95 years, yes, nearly a century, they've been getting fuel from this privately owned terminal on Fisher Island. Every other major cruise port in America has fuel on site. Port Canaveral, they've got it. Port Everglades, yep. Tampa, Jacksonville, even tiny Palm Beach, all have their own fuel. But Miami, the supposed cruise capital of the world, they've been winging it with borrowed fuel from a private company that just sold out to condo developers. The terminal holds 672,000 barrels of marine fuel. That's the only large bunker terminal in the entire Miami area. Without it, ships literally cannot operate. And here's what should terrify every cruiser. The developers only agreed to keep it running until summer 2027. After that, game over. Number 2, 340,000 jobs and $61 billion hanging by a thread. Let's talk numbers that will make your head spin. Port Miami generates $61 billion with a B, in economic impact every year. That's not cruise line profits. That's real money flowing through Florida's economy. We're talking 340,000 jobs statewide. Hotels, restaurants, Uber drivers, tour operators, dock workers, all dependent on those cruise ships having fuel. In February 2025, the port set a record with 10 ships docked simultaneously. That's 68,000 passengers in a single day. Think about the logistics, the fuel, the coordination. Now imagine all of that grinding to a halt because nobody thought to secure the fuel supply. Royal Caribbean's CEO Jason Liberty, and when the CEO personally shows up to emergency meetings, you know it's bad, told commissioners point blank, no major U.S. port operates without fuel bunkering. If Port Miami loses this capability, the consequences would be severe. Severe, that's CEO speak for, we're moving our ships to another port, and guess what? Port Canaveral is sitting pretty just 3 hours north with brand new fuel facilities and room to grow. They're already handling 7.6 million passengers. They'd love Miami's business. Number 3, the emergency meetings that expose decades of failure. This is where it gets absolutely insane. County commissioners found out about this crisis in September 2025. September, the fuel terminal was advertised for sale in May 2024, over a year earlier, and nobody told them. Nobody flagged it. Nobody thought, hey, maybe we should mention that our only fuel source is about to become a condo complex. Commissioner Oliver Gilbert, and I love this quote, said they went from playing with fire to playing with hell. Another commissioner called it the 9th inning with 2 outs. These aren't random critics. These are the elected officials responsible for the port, and they're openly admitting they got blindsided. The port's deputy director, get this, said he doesn't follow the real estate market as part of his job. The real estate market, when your entire fuel supply depends on one piece of real estate, it's like a pilot saying they don't check the weather. Here's the truth bomb. A 2014 study warned them this could happen. 11 years ago, consultants said, Build your own fuel facility. It'll cost $42 million. Did they do it? Of course not. That $42 million solution is now a potential $200 million emergency that could sink the entire port. Number 4. The countdown clock to chaos. Summer 2027. Mark this date, summer 2027. That's when the music stops. That's when the current fuel agreement expires and the developers can bulldoze those tanks to build their luxury condos. We're not talking about some distant future. We're talking about 20 months from now. Think you're safe because your cruise is next month? Next year? Think again. Here's what insiders know. Cruise lines book their ships 2 to 3 years out. They're making decisions right now about where ships will be in 2027, 2028, 2029. And if Miami can't guarantee fuel, those ships are going elsewhere. The county scheduled emergency mediation for October 20th, just days ago. If that fails, they're threatening eminent domain, which means forcibly taking the property through the courts. But eminent domain isn't instant. It's a legal battle that could take years the port doesn't have. Meanwhile, every day that passes without a solution is another day. Cruise lines are hedging their bets. They're quietly expanding operations at other ports, testing alternate routes, making backup plans that don't include Miami. Number 5. Why Miami is the only port with this problem. This is the part that should make every Miami cruiser furious. Port Miami is literally the only major cruise port in America without its own fuel facility. Let that sink in. The busiest cruise port in the world has been operating on borrowed time with borrowed fuel for 95 years. Port Canaveral, they own their fuel terminal. Plus, they were smart enough to become the first U.S. port offering LNG fuel for newer, cleaner ships. Port Everglades, 16 different fuel terminals on site. Even after massive flooding in 2023, they were back up in days because they control their infrastructure. Barcelona, Southampton, every major port worldwide. They all figured this out decades ago. But Miami? They've been relying on tugboats dragging fuel barges from Fisher Island. It takes 5 hours to fill a barge, 1 hour to tug it over. The whole operation costs $40 more per ton than any other port. Former port officials admitted they knew this was inefficient, they knew it was risky, but fixing it meant spending money and making hard decisions, so they kicked the can down the road for 95 years. Number 6, the 2 desperate solutions that might not work. The county has 2 options, and both are terrible. Option 1, buy the Fisher Island facility through eminent domain. Sounds simple? It's not. First, they need to negotiate. If that fails, they go to court. The property sold for $180 million, but in court, with lawyers, with appeals, it could cost way more. Plus, and here's the catch, 800 wealthy families live on Fisher Island, the richest zip code in America. They've been fighting to remove those fuel tanks for decades. They don't want them. The Homeowners Association chairman said explicitly, "We do not support anything that keeps the tanks there." Option 2, build a new fuel facility at the port. The 2014 study said $42 million. Today, with inflation, permits, environmental reviews, we're talking $100 million easy. Plus, it would eat up 10 acres of prime port real estate. That's space for a whole new cruise terminal. Gone. And here's what nobody's talking about. Time. Either solution takes years of planning, permits, construction. The developers gave them until 2027. Do the math. It doesn't work. Number 7, what this actually means for your cruise. Let's get specific about how this disaster affects you, the passenger. Right now, today, your cruise is probably fine. Ships are sailing, fuel is flowing. But here's what's coming if this isn't fixed. First, schedule changes. Fuel deliveries by barge take days to arrange. If there's any disruption, your ship might leave late, or early, or not at all. Remember, it takes 6 hours minimum to fuel one ship. Port Miami sometimes has 10 ships in port. Second, itinerary changes. Ships might start fueling at other ports, adding stops you didn't sign up for. That day in Cozumel might become a fuel stop in Port Everglades. Third, price increases. That inefficient barge system already costs $40 more per ton. Who do you think pays for that? Every extra dollar in fuel costs gets passed to passengers through higher fares, fees, and onboard prices. But here's the nuclear option. Cruise lines moving out entirely. Royal Caribbean's CEO wasn't bluffing. If Miami can't guarantee fuel, ships will home port elsewhere. Your Miami cruise becomes a Fort Lauderdale cruise or a Port Canaveral cruise. Different airport, different hotel, different everything. For 2027 bookings and beyond, you're gambling. You're betting Miami solves this crisis. Because if they don't, your cruise confirmation isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Number 8, the insider information cruise lines don't want you to know. Former port employees are finally talking, And what they're saying should terrify anyone with a Miami cruise booked. They've known about this vulnerability for years. Internal reports, studies, meetings, all pointing to this exact crisis. But nobody wanted to be the one to spend the money to fix it. Here's what they're not telling passengers. Contingency planning is already happening. Cruise lines are secretly expanding capacity at other ports, adding fuel contracts elsewhere, training staff on emergency rerouting procedures. They're preparing for Miami to fail while telling passengers everything's fine. The International Longshoremen's Association, representing 1,500 dock workers, warned that changes could affect every single job at the port. When the union starts talking about everyone losing their jobs, that's not fear-mongering. That's reality knocking. And consider this. October's mediation happened behind closed doors, confidential, no public record. They don't want you knowing how bad negotiations really are. They don't want passenger panic affecting bookings. They definitely don't want Wall Street knowing their $61 billion economic engine might be running on fumes. Number 9. Why this is just the tip of the iceberg. The fuel crisis is exposing something much bigger. Port Miami is falling apart. The port's fire station has been operating from a temporary trailer for over 30 years. 30 years! The master plan hasn't been updated since 2011. They don't have shore power for ships to plug in, forcing them to run dirty diesel generators in port. Commissioner Regalado called this a chance to bring Port Miami into the 21st century. Think about that. We're in 2025, and she's talking about joining the 21st century. That's how far behind they are. Other ports are installing LNG fuel systems, the cleaner fuel of the future. Port Canaveral did it 5 years ago. Barcelona handles nearly 500 LNG operations a year. Miami, still using the same barges from Fisher Island they've used since 1930. This isn't just about fuel. It's about a port that's been coasting on its reputation while everyone else modernized. The busiest cruise port in the world is also the most vulnerable. One hurricane, one accident, one lawsuit, and the whole house of cards collapses. The truth is brutal but simple. Port Miami's leadership has failed for decades, and now with 20 months left on the clock, they're scrambling to solve a problem they've ignored for 95 years. The bottom line? Here's what every cruiser needs to understand. This crisis is real, it's urgent, and it's not going away. Port Miami has exactly one source of fuel. That source has been sold to condo developers. The deadline is summer 2027, and right now there's no solution in place. If you have a cruise booked from Miami, you need to stay informed. Check for updates, have backup plans. Consider travel insurance that covers port changes, and maybe, just maybe, think about booking from Port Canaveral or Fort Lauderdale instead. Because while Miami figures out how they screwed this up so badly, your vacation hangs in the balance. The cruise industry generates $61 billion for Florida. It employs 340,000 people. It serves 8 million passengers a year. And it all depends on fuel from a terminal that's about to become waterfront condos. If that doesn't scare you, you're not paying attention. Look, I've been covering the cruise industry for years, and I've never seen anything this catastrophic. This isn't a storm you can wait out. This isn't a mechanical problem you can fix. This is decades of negligence coming home to roost, and passengers like you are going to pay the price. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening at Port Miami, hit that subscribe button right now. And comment Cruise Smart below if you think Miami needs to get its act together before it's too late. Share this with anyone you know who has a Miami cruise booked. They deserve to know the truth. The clock is ticking. Summer 2027 is coming, and Port Miami is running on fumes, literally.